Shepherds we shall be, for thee, my Lord, for thee. Power hath descended forth from thy hand, that our feet may swiftly carry out thy command. So we shall flow a river forth to thee, and teeming with souls shall it ever be. In nomine Patri et Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our new podcast. It's called Real Time 25 Years Later. It's a podcast looking back 25 years at the year 2000. I'm Kevin Foux.
And I'm Kevin Rice. So the goal of this podcast is to take a look back at the movies from 25 years ago as they were released in the theater, so in release order. And we're going to see if they have the legacy they deserve. Are they underrated masterpieces that have gotten lost to time, or are they overrated messes that just need to stay in the past?
Today, we're talking about a film that many of you probably know, The Boondock Saints, which Kevin and I actually hadn't seen it until we decided to review it a few days ago. But since we hadn't seen it and since we weren't very familiar with it, we decided to bring our friend and the super fan, I guess you could call him, of the movie, Jared Hinson, onto the podcast today. And Jared, tell us how you became a fan of the film.
Back in early 2000, I was on my first job in a television station, and so I had money but no bills. So I would literally every night go to Blockbuster. Does that put you in the right time frame? I went to Blockbuster, and I would check out a movie. It got to the point where the people who worked there were saying, you can keep this more than a day, right? And I was like, yeah, but I was literally watching a movie a day.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And after a while, you run out of ones that you've been told to watch or you've been meaning to watch, and you start browsing the shelves. And I saw this one called Boondock Saints, and it had a couple of guys on the cover in very sort of stark black and white, pointing guns. And I was like, okay, what's this? Turn it around. It's a VHS copy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that further put you back where we are?
Yes.
And it said that it had what I would interpret it as, it's got young Indiana Jones in it. And it's also got Willem Dafoe. And I was like, well, okay, that sounds fun. And then I saw it had Billy Connolly, who's a Scottish comedian I was a big fan of. I was like, yeah, why not? What's the worst to get at? So I got it home, and it was great because I went in completely blind. No trailer, no anyone ever mentioning the film to me, nothing. So I got to be that annoying friend who walked around saying, have you heard of the Boondock Saints? You should watch this movie. Yeah, so I got to sort of see it without anyone else's opinions, good, bad, or ugly, on it. And, so that's maybe the best way to watch most movies, honestly.
Yeah.
But usually you don't get the chance.
I was still coming close to wetting my bed. I was about 12 years old. So I'm a little bit younger than you guys. Didn't have a job or anything yet. 12, I still do have a very religious mother, and there is no way that she would let me watch a film like this. So yeah, I was still watching, cartoons, Batman, all that at the time. I think SpongeBob had just come out. So yeah, this is not a movie that my parents would have let me touch with a 12-foot pole. So obviously it's something I would have checked out later. And it's just one of those things I never got around to. You do hear about it. It does come up in a lot of conversations among film nerds, which are a lot of my friends. And for some reason, Boondock just slipped out. I never caught up, never saw it, but I'm looking forward to, doing a podcast like this with you guys and talking about it here today. So yeah, Kevin, let's move on.
On the streets of Boston.
This was no gangland assassination. It was way too sloppy. Something went wrong here.
An FBI agent is on a case.
All the lowlifes in the quiet city of Boston start dropping dead, and you think it's unrelated.
They're all bad guys. Now they're all dead bad guys.
The victims are the mob.
What we have here, gentlemen, is the beginning of the first international mob war.
And the hitmen think they're on a mission from God.
The movie today we're talking about is The Boondock Saints, written and directed by Troy Duffy. So Troy Duffy was not a filmmaker. He was working at a bar in L.A. He was a musician. And one day, outside of his bar, he saw a crime take place. He saw a couple of people take money, pickpocket an unconscious person on the street. And this inspired him to write a story about vigilante justice and cleaning up the streets of crime. And he started shopping it around, wrote the screenplay, started shopping it around the studios. And, the rest is history. It actually got picked up by none other than notorious scumbag Harvey Weinstein and Miramax Pictures. Was where it was. It's where it started its journey into Hollywood. A $15 million budget was on the line. However, that fell apart because apparently the deal broke down because they were butting heads. And if you can't make friends with Harvey Weinstein, what are you going to do in Hollywood? I guess your movie's just not going to get made. So the movie did finally get released, produced and released on a much smaller $6 million budget independently. However, the release was then further troubled because it got scaled back, they say, because of Columbine. So Columbine happened in 1999. Terrible tragedy. And this movie is about two young men picking up guns and causing mayhem. And so there was
their characteristic black coats.
Yes, exactly. And so there was a lot of trepidation around it. So the film only actually released in 5 theaters across the nation for a week. It only ran for 1 week. And
really, when it first
released,
came out, it was
in January 2000.
Theaters.
Only
Wow.
5 theaters, and it only made, I think, around $36,000. So it was a massive flop in the theater distribution.
But it does explain why a movie person like myself would never have heard of it.
Exactly.
It a VHS shelf at the back of Blockbuster.
Exactly. It was pretty much buried theatrically.
Honestly, the fact that it is a cult status and popular today is pretty crazy. That's to open in 5 theaters and make 30,000. I mean, 30,000 in today's money, that's like, you might as well throw the movie in the trash. Like, that's crazy. Like, so yeah, the fact that we're still talking about it, that definitely says something.
Exactly.
I think that it actually helps in a way that it had that kind of terrible release, because that way the only people saying you should watch this are your friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of people have called this movie a Tarantino knockoff. Tarantino, obviously, a fantastic writer-director. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. He was very influential in establishing that 90s independent, spirit. And a lot of it is, hardcore crime, very visceral, very aggressive.
I'm doing it. It is.
As I was watching it, I was actually thinking that. I was like, is this kind of a discount Quentin Tarantino thing? Like, is it because it did, I mean, it does remind me very much of it, especially, you got a lot of dropping F-bombs multiple times, a lot of hard language. Like, that was kind of his style, or kind of still is his style,
I heard a lot of this at the time. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's Tarantino." But one thing that I noticed, just from my own perspective, everyone who saw a movie that wasn't told 100% linear said, "Oh, it's Tarantino." And it's like, well, he wasn't the first guy to tell a movie out of order, and he certainly won't be the last. I mean, he did it extremely well, and it was a really notable example in Pulp Fiction, especially, though he did it with his earlier film Reservoir Dogs and would continue to do it for most of his career. That's mostly what it was. I think with a lot of the language stuff, people say, "Oh, it's just Tarantino is known for his characters using a lot of language." That's true. He's also not the first to do that. I think a lot of what Tarantino did was make it kind of okay. It made it so the producers knew you would still have an audience, even with that amount of language, with that amount of violence. So I think influenced by Tarantino, sure. I think he's a lot more punk rock, Troy Duffy is, than Tarantino ever was or wanted to be. I think I understand the comparison. I think it's more fair to say if you like Tarantino crime movies, you very well might like Boondock Saints.
So let's take a look at some of the critical reception that came out. I pulled some quotes, both from Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd. So as it stands right now, the Rotten Tomato score for the critical reception, not good. 26% rotten.
Oh, yeah.
So that means 26% of the critics would recommend the movie. Nathan Rabin of the AV Club says satire or self-parody would be vastly preferable to the film's unironic endorsement of outlaw justice, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anything resembling irony or subversiveness in this exercise in lovingly rendered ultraviolence. Jared, satire or self-parody, do you think that's just not giving the movie the credit it deserves?
No, I think that you've got a reviewer who's got his maybe he's got his time glasses on backwards, because unapologetic vigilantism was very common until we had too much real shootings in schools and in public places and things like that. But you go watch the movies of the 70s and tell me how much unapologetic, non-satirical vigilante justice there is.
Very true. Very true.
In fact, if you put enough costume on it, then it's just Batman. It's vigilante justice has always been a thing, and saying that it's only bad guys do it is, you shouldn't expect that of most films that do it. It's there's supposed to be some catharsis in it.
So Robert Kohler of Variety, he said, more interested in finding fresh ways to stage execution scenes than in finding meaning behind the human urge for self-appointed righting of wrongs. The picture is stuffed with effects that have no lasting impact. So that, to me, sounds like a style over substance criticism. So, Kev, Jared, did the movie actually have more to say just in the quote-unquote glorification of revenge?
I guess I'll start here. I actually like what Jared just said and how he framed it, because I'm looking at this film through a very modern lens, and I'm kind of find myself agreeing with the critics a little bit, especially when I watched it. I mean, I literally just watched it like day before yesterday, and so I have to keep reframing my thoughts in mind about how different the world was 25 years ago. And when Jared brought up like the Columbine shooting and how, the vigilante justice was different back then, we didn't see all these different shootings and violence and stuff that we have today, in the news cycle 24/7 constantly. So I keep having to like rethink, because whenever you say these criticisms and you're, reading these comments, I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's just a boring, like so much of this ultra violence to me is boring now, because I've seen the John Wicks. I've seen like every single, big blockbuster Fast and the Furious action movie from the past 25 years, but I think going back and looking at it through like, okay, how would I approach this in the year 2000, or what would I think of it? I think for the time period and for what it did, it was a pretty damn cool movie. And I think the action scenes and the characters are still pretty fun. Regardless, like, I think you can look at any movie now and be like, oh, I've seen this done better. Of course, John Wick, look at the choreography, look at how cool it looks, look at how, we have HD cameras now. Everything looks awesome. Everything's in 4K. Everything looks way cooler than anything they could have done in Boondock Saints. But 25 years ago, these two characters, I mean, say what you want about the guy, but Norman Reedus is a pretty cool dude. He's a pretty cool dude. And like, I enjoy just, even on The Walking Dead or watching him in this, just shoot people and do cool stuff. He's got that stoicism down, like that kind of like, just that gentle stoicism about him that you just know he's a bad motherfucker. And so I don't know. I don't think these criticisms are without merit. I do understand where they're coming from, and the movie by today's standards, it probably is a little cliched. But as far as like a classic from the year 2000, it hits the mark. It does a good job, like getting you into the world of the characters, understanding why they're doing what they're doing. And yeah, it's fun to watch two vigilantes shoot a room of like Russians. I think that's always going to be fun.
I can't imagine what you guys are seeing, honestly, having watched this movie only just now.
Right, yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it, because it's such a different
Well, I'll be honest, to kind of echo Kev's point, watching it now for the first time, I think I probably enjoyed it a lot less than I would have had I watched it when I was a 16-year-old kid. In the year 2000. I enjoyed it. I did. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it. Do I think it's a particularly good movie? No. But it still has a lot to like and a lot to enjoy. But I did pretty much the whole time push against that whole, well, this is kind of tired. I've seen this so many times. This is really nothing that different than what I expected it to be in all those years I avoided watching it. So I'm not going to say I was disappointed in the movie and watching it, because I do want to try to, what would have year 2000 Kevin have thought of it, he probably would have loved it. But just watching it today for the first time, it did feel a little, a little weak.
I feel kind of exactly the same way as you do, but seeing this film as like a 15-year-old, I probably would have thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I kind of feel bad, or not bad, but I understand where the older listeners are coming from in the older age bracket, because they might be listening to this and being like, these two freaking idiots, this is the coolest movie, I love this movie. But it's whenever you grow up with films and you're younger when you watch them, of course you're going to think they're one of the best things ever. So I think that's kind of the challenge of this podcast, is going back 25 years and not having seen these things and like holding up our idols, and we're either going to destroy them or or see if we actually cherish them for what they are.
Okay, so I have some Letterboxd reviews as well. Hannah gave it 5 stars, saying this movie is a gem, and if you don't think so, you have no taste and are Irish phobic.
My wife would agree with that. My wife is Irish and she loves this film, but she also grew up watching it. But
there you go. Now,
yeah.
Jared, you've got Irish heritage. How do you feel the Irish representation was here?
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
It's honestly, this first movie is way less about Irish and much more about Bostonians. Boston Irish.
Right.
And I don't know any Boston Irish personally, so I'm just going to leave that one alone.
Mm-hmm. S.G. Pilling gave it 5 stars. Simple 2-word review, just says, Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say Dafoe. I mean, depending on what he's depicting in this film, but I mean, the guy's always kind of a freak, right?
Right, yeah.
He's my favorite part of the film.
And we'll dig more into that here in a little bit. Kira gave it 1/2 star. Says Willem Dafoe about to go to back surgery after carrying this entire movie. And I will kind of have to agree a bit with this one, just because he is far and away the standout. Yeah, not only the performer, but just the character in general just had a lot to it. Some good, some not so good, that we'll talk about. But still, it was definitely the standout of the movie. Fraud Struggler gave it a 1/2 star, says, this movie should only be used as a torture technique and nothing more.
That's harsh.
That's pretty harsh.
Did he watch it last week?
He just might have. Let's go ahead and just kind of get into open discussion about the movie, kind of a review of the movie. So, Kev, you and I both coming to this for the first time. Let's just talk about it. What do you think worked about the movie? What didn't work about the movie?
One of my least favorite scenes, and I guess some of the things that I feel are a little bit dated with the film and just do not work 25 years later, is the amount of just absolute constant yelling and no structure to the scene. I feel like, especially with the Rocco character, I'm like, did they just give this guy drugs, like hard drugs, and just let him walk on the set? Because he's constantly screaming. He never shuts up. He was by far my least favorite part of the film. And I understand Boston, it's probably a very true to life character, especially because he's a gangster, he's a criminal, works with the mob. I get it. The character, God, it was awful. Anytime Rocco was on the screen, I wanted to shoot myself. So I can't say that I really cared for that aspect of the film. Like, I just wanted a little bit tighter storytelling from that. It's like it was definitely just like pure improv. It's like, let's let this guy go crazy. Let the Saints go crazy with him, and then we'll blow up a cat along the way. And that's a pretty iconic scene, I imagine. Pretty funny scene. But yeah, I don't know. That aspect of it didn't work. I wish it just had a little bit more structure in some places. It felt really loose.
That really is kind of my big beef with the movie is there's just not a lot of focus to it. There's not really much to dig into as far as like character arcs. The plot is pretty thin. It's just, okay, we're vigilantes who have a mission from God, and we're gonna clean up the streets of Boston, and then it's just pretty much the sequences showing that. I will say I did appreciate the nonlinear structure of it. I did like that. One of my favorite scenes of the movie was the one where they're at the house shootout, where they're at the house where they first introduced Il Duce, and Willem Dafoe's character Smecker, the FBI agent tracking them, doing the flashbacks, inserting himself into the scene in the flashbacks as he's kind of analyzing the scene.
They came in through the garage. The kid says he leaves it open when he takes his bike out.
Panic. Devastation. It's just like shooting fish in a friggin' gun.
I liked that. That was really well done. I would have liked just a bit more beef to kind of that stuff. So, Jared, you're over there shaking your head and
yes,
calling us
insert
assholes.
sound effect of knuckles cracking. I would say if you guys like this movie at all, I'd say give it one more watch.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's much easier to spot, I think, structure on a second watch than first by far. So here's the thing. I'm gonna get a little bit nerdy just for a second. So whenever I've been taught about story structure and character structure, we're talking about arcs. There is such a thing as, and it sounds like it's a stupid phrase, but it's a flat arc.
Mm-hmm.
The character doesn't change, but they do change the world around them.
Okay.
Jack Reacher is considered to be a flat arc. He is who he is. He's not going to change by the end of it, but he will have changed his environment.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is not about the brothers changing. It's about them changing Willem Dafoe. It's about the idea of how do you go from the crazy idea to an accepted idea. It's, if you notice, because you guys both talk about the what I believe is the best scene in the film, which is I think of it as there was a firefight scene.
Yes.
There was a firefight!
Where Dafoe very obviously references his own role in Platoon. Go check out the first time he solves one of their crimes, the alley. And you don't get to see what he's thinking until it's done. You don't get to see what they actually did until we're past it. They're very separate. But then, whenever he figures out what they've done at the peep show, well, now we're cutting back and forth between them as they get closer. And then the third time he does it, they're together. It's the more he thinks about what they're doing, the closer he gets to them. Not just to catching them, but to understanding them.
Interesting.
And that's the ultimate move in the movie, is to get him on their side. It's the idea that it's becoming a thing. It's not a couple crazy guys just doing their thing until they either get caught or not. It's that idea of it spreading.
I believe that these young men are right.
You know them personally?
Yes.
Would they ever harm an innocent person for any reason?
No. They would never do that. Well, the two Irish guys wouldn't. The Italian guy, he's kind of an idiot.
Filmmaking wise, Jared, anything stand out as particularly good, especially considering the low budget nature of it, the first time director aspect of it?
I think you can definitely see, filmmaker wise, that it is rough around the edges. I think all aspects of this movie are rough around the edges.
Yeah.
That's certainly not a flawless execution.
I think that's part of its charm.
Kind of its charm,
Exactly.
honestly. Yeah, that's the whole point. That's why I say it's very punk rock. You know, you're not supposed to hit every note just right. You're supposed to have some discordance in there a little bit to get, or you don't get that vibe. It starts to feel corporate. That being said, as far as like things that really worked well, I thought that he did some stuff, because people talk about this movie having no subtlety, and I think that's really a little unfair. And again, I think a second watch will show you things like, it doesn't get much more subtle in a film than to see a look between one character and another, and that look speaking volumes. And whenever the Russians are leading Norman Reedus out of the apartment, Sean Patrick Flannery is handcuffed to the toilet. The look that Norman Reedus gives his brother is everything. It tells you exactly, this is a do or die moment for both of them. And it should come as no surprise that a toilet gets yanked out of the ground a few moments later.
A very obviously styrofoam toilet, I would point out as well.
Be that as it may. They were very poor, Kevin. They can't afford porcelain.
That's how it was 25 years ago, Kevin. Come on. I think the toilet might be my second favorite scene, just because the tenacity, just the raw determination to not die and not let his brother die. I thought that was a really well done scene, despite the styrofoam. I did want to circle back around to Schmecker, because I think, and Nick, you'll like this one if you're listening, he's such an anime character. He's such an anime hero. Just He's so over the top in every scene from the get-go.
Kind of makes me feel like river dancing.
Every scene with Willem Dafoe is a delight, all the way to the end. I mean, his turn at the end when he fully embraces them, and the third act. Let's just say it: the cross dressing. It's absolutely wild.
It's pure Bugs Bunny right there.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Oh, come on, Mama.
What the fuck? He always steals the show. I mean, he's pretty much reliable to be the best thing in whatever he's in, honestly. And by the way, he is celebrating his 70th birthday this July. So happy early birthday, Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. Still got it, man.
Still
Absolutely.
got
it. I will do you one more level maybe for Willem Dafoe's character, having for my most recent rewatch especially. I've heard a lot over the years about how he is the most wild, outlandish character in a film with a few of them in it. You know, that's saying something. But here's the fun bit: he's also the most organized and reserved. It depends on the moment.
Yeah,
picture him telling the police officers about the Russian mob versus the Italians in America. He's the most quiet and intelligent character in the film. By far, he's also the one who dresses up like a prostitute. Kevin Rice and I talked years ago about needing to have a bit of a roller coaster in a story. Because if like a horror film is just, pants-wettingly scary the whole time, it stops being scary at all. You get numb to it. And I think that within his own performance, Dafoe is showing you just how crazy he's being because of how calm he is other times. And it just speaks to the actor a lot, because he could have easily performed those same kind of expositioning scenes that he did so calmly and professionally. He could have done them in a very out there kind of way, but he chose not to. It's really impressive. Really impressive guy to watch.
Now we come to the controversial portion of the podcast. We're going to take a look back 25 years later. What doesn't work? What doesn't hold up anymore? What feels very much a product of its time? And I've got a couple of big ones, but I want to start with you guys because we might have the same ones that I have. So, Kev, what should stay in 2000?
One of the things that should stay in 2000, and this was also probably my least favorite scene. Obviously, it's a Rocco scene I brought up earlier. I didn't care for him very much, but it's particularly when Rocco is in the apartment degrading the women that just walked in, and he's just calling them every misogynistic name under the book. And I just thought, like, it's kind of unnecessary. Like, it didn't, like, I get it. He's losing it. He's losing his grip on reality because he's been betrayed by the mob and he might die. I get it. I just feel like they could have moved that scene on with the two brothers and just not even had the women there, because it's just a misogynistic, women hating rant. He's just calling them, whores and hooker and all that stuff. And it's just like, it's unnecessary. I don't feel like it is, watching it through a modern lens. I was just like, oh, this is nasty. I don't really feel like it's enhancing the story in any way. So that to me just didn't hit right. So definitely something they could have left.
So your fix for the misogyny in the movie is just to remove the women entirely.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just make it more about men. Jeez.
Generally speaking, anytime this movie is talking about anything besides the brothers or Dafoe, I think they've wandered off a little bit too far. So my pick for not only doesn't belong in the film, but doesn't belong in a modern film either, is the tell me a joke scene.
See, that was one of my picks.
Tell me a funny joke.
There's these three guys, a white guy and a black guy. Yeah.
This is an unfunny racist joke.
Exactly. It's a rough scene. It's a really, really tough scene to watch. And I think, honestly, even back then, it would have felt very try hard and very just, I'm 15 and this is edgy. Kind of a scene.
I can see trying to make the argument that it is the humor that those men would have appreciated.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I have to sit through it.
I know. I'm having a hard day. This joke sucks. It's a stupid joke.
We should note that scene also features the introduction of one Ron Jeremy,
Who's that? I don't know who that
into
is.
the movie. When it came on, I literally texted Kevin, "Fucking Ron Jeremy's in this movie." For those of you listening, watching who don't know, Ron Jeremy was the very famous star of many a pornograph, known for his, if you will,
They know
longevity
who he is.
in the business. Yeah, everybody knows. Come on.
Well, I heard a great interview clip with Troy Duffy talking about casting Ron Jeremy, and he said that the moment that he loved picturing in his head whenever Ron first shows up on screen is that, like say like a husband and wife or whoever are watching it at home on the couch, and he comes out and they both go, and then both look at each other like, how do you know who that is?
Yeah.
So that's basically the entire joke of having Ron in the film.
Exactly. So my second pick, I did share the pick of the Tell Me a Joke scene, but my second pick is really kind of more of a character aspect, less so much of just a single individual scene. I think it's unfortunate that Smecker, Willem Dafoe's character, being gay is really only used as a punchline. Especially in the scene that that it's revealed that he's gay. He's just, had sex with his lover, and his lover shows affection to him, and Dafoe responds by calling him a very unfortunate slur.
Keep the press up. What are you doing?
I just wanted to cuddle.
Cuddle? What a
It just feels like the only reason you really put this in the movie is just to be able to, A, shock, which is not really interesting in and of itself, and then B, just to kind of have a juvenile punchline around it.
I think there's one aspect of it that does play a little bit better. Again, second watches might help this, might not. My opinion on it is that when you first see him at all, before that, the big reveal, watch the way that he interacts with the police in the alley, the way that he'll put a hand on his shoulder and all that. And they'll look at each other.
Yeah, I did know.
So they're looking at each other going, is this guy? And then here's the thing. These Boston cops who were making those kind of, looks and jokes, the Freudian slip that happens shortly thereafter. But then at the end, they are silently flipping notebooks open and waiting to hear what this guy has to say, because despite everything that should turn off a Boston Irish cop,
they still respect him.
They have nothing but respect by the end of it. And so there's nothing, it's not that there's no redeeming qualities to it. But I do understand when you have that scene in particular, it's a bit of just a shock value kind of scene.
All right, let's do our legacy check. Okay, so kind of a final verdict of your review. Does the movie deserve the legacy it's have? So, Jared, is it overrated, underrated, or properly remembered?
I could have answered this question before we had this conversation. And now I kind of can't. So speaking from someone who saw it very shortly after release and has seen it several times since, with the caveat always with a movie that didn't come out too terribly recently, there's going to be some stuff in there that's going to be a product of its time. And this movie is very much imperfect in every aspect. It is very rough around the edges, and some of that is very much a charming thing, and some of it really honestly could have gone. I'll say something controversial just for fun. I think that the cat being shot would have been a fantastic, everyone's favorite deleted scene.
Right, yeah.
Because it added nothing. It added nothing at all. In fact, it was one of the little points that people like to make, saying, oh, it's Tarantino, because there's an accidental shooting in Pulp Fiction. They're very, very different scenes, but whatever. So from my point of view, I think that it is still a very fun movie, with the caveat that they're going to do some stuff that it should not be done then or now. But if you're willing to look past its flaws, I think I think it deserves its cult status. I also completely understand that not being picked up by someone who's watching it for the first time, right? Because it's not a flaw of the person watching to say, oh, well, I try to think if I had been 15 watching it, it's like, but you're not. Yeah. And that's not your fault. You are the viewer that you are, and it either plays to you or it doesn't.
I think for me, the bellwether of whether a movie deserves its legacy is, can somebody watching it for the first time enjoy it just as much as somebody who watched it then? Somebody coming, a 15-year-old coming to watch Jurassic Park for the first time is going to have their mind blown, because it's just a wonderful movie that holds up in so many ways. Whereas, watching this for the first time now, kind of feeling its age, feeling its the weight of so many years of expectations weighing against it as well. That's why for me it feels a bit overrated. I understand why people like this movie, especially people like you, Jared, who have been with it for so long. For me, as a first-time watcher, didn't really work in a lot of ways for me. I still had fun. I still enjoyed watching it. But does it deserve the cult classic status that it has? Does it deserve to have lived in posters on people's dorm rooms for as long as it has? I'm not sure. I'm leaning towards no, overrated.
As far as a legacy check on the movie goes, I think Jared was the perfect person to have on this podcast for me. I think one of the best things you can do whenever you're a critic or whenever you're watching these films is actually just listen to your friends and listen to people around you, because the points that Jared made today on the podcast have actually elevated the film in my eyes a little bit. I was kind of down on it, and then he brought up, especially the point about flat characters and the arc and the world changing around them, and I was just kind of like, you know what, he's got a good point. And I think maybe on a rewatch, I think I probably would enjoy this a little bit more. I'm not gonna say that this is up there with the other films of the 2000s, like a Matrix or something like that. It definitely deserves its cult status, in my opinion. It's a cult film. It's not going to be for everybody. I don't think it's overrated or underrated. I think it deserves what it got, and I'm glad it got to where it did. Especially for a film that opened in like 5 theaters. I mean, that's impressive for what it is. So yeah, I'm gonna go with, after hearing Jared's opinion today, yeah, I think it deserves its status.
Oh, and you know what? I've got one more. I've got the shocking final twist.
Okay.
It's everyone's favorite thing: anecdotal evidence. So, Kevin, you talking about Kevin Rice? Sorry. Yes. You're talking about how would someone seeing it now enjoy it as much as someone seeing it then? Well, guys, I've got a 14-year-old daughter.
There you go.
Okay.
And she has seen it.
Okay.
And she absolutely loved it. Now, she looked at me sideways during some scenes that we talked about. And she's like, and I was like, it was back then. I apologize. But that's just how it was.
We were less evolved as a society back then.
Yeah.
Well, also, it does help to notice things like, it's like, oh, there's a scene with this horribly racist joke. It's like, yes, there is. And I don't honestly think it belongs in the film. That being said, they're not good guys. They're not characters you're supposed to like. Right? They're bad people doing bad things. That doesn't really justify it enough. But yeah, no, she thoroughly enjoyed it. She thought it was really funny. She had no idea who Ron Jeremy is, and still doesn't. Thanks very much.
That you know of.
That I know of.
Overall, kind of final thoughts on the Boondock Saints 25 years later. I enjoyed the movie. I did. Even though I kind of dragged it a couple times here, I did enjoy it. I do not regret watching it at all. I think it is very much a product of its time and a product of its troubled production. But I think there's a lot of merit here and a lot of value here. So, Jared, final thoughts?
Final thoughts is it's a first time director's very, very rough and tumble punk rock movie. I think whether you like what it's trying to do or not, it did what it was trying to do. I think the real question is, are you interested in that outcome? Yeah. Because some people definitely are not going to be, and some people are going to love it. But I think ultimately you got to give the props for that, is that he did what he set out to do.
I think it's definitely, like you said, a product of its time. I really had fun watching it. I think it's got some wonderful, wonderful things about it, especially Willem Dafoe's performance. For my older friends, like maybe 35 and older, I would say, hey, yeah, check this out. You'll be, probably similar to things you've watched in the past. To my like Gen Z coworkers and friends, I probably wouldn't even bring this movie up. I think it's beyond them at this point. I mean, but Jared, you said your daughter really enjoyed it, so maybe some of them have some hope of watching this. But I do not think it would play well with the Gen Z crowd. I do want to say big thank you to Jared. I think you were the perfect first guest to have. We'll have you back, obviously.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to be it. That's going to wrap it up for Real Time 25 years later. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. And we'll see you next week. We're going to try to drop the next episode on February the 4th of The Beach. And we'll see how that one goes. Thanks, everybody.